Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome, listeners, to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, a podcast of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. For today's episode only, I will act as the host. My name is Kara Fornstrom. I'm the director of the Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis at the School of Energy Resources, and I'm thrilled today to interview the permanent host of the podcast, Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources. So Holly, let's start with your background. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What was your job history before you found your way to the School of Energy Resources?
Okay, so hi everyone, and thank you, Kara. And this podcast is Kara's vision, so super excited to try something new like this and appreciate Kara for that vision. So I was born and raised in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. It's a small town, not too different from Laramie, Wyoming. Almost as windy, but really hot. So imagine standing in front of a hairdryer all day instead of standing in front of a freezer. Really loved it. Moved to Tulsa when I was about 9. Went to middle school and high school there, and then went to the University of Oklahoma. And I went to OU for 9 straight years. Something special there. And really enjoyed my time there. I got into undergraduate research, so my advisor, one of my professors, actually, instructing a class that was very math heavy, noticed that I had an aptitude for math. And it's funny because I was in chemical engineering, really not the best at chemistry, but really love math. And so he did a lot of work in turbulence modeling and very math heavy disciplines, and asked me if I would be interested in doing undergraduate research. And I thought that would be a better job than making coffee or slinging pizzas, at least for my resume. And so I did do it, and I just really liked working for him. And so as I became a second-year senior in my undergraduate and neared graduation, he talked me into staying for a master's because I had done already 2 years of work. He said it would only take 1 year. And then somehow during the course of that year, he convinced me to get a PhD. And so it was not something that was at all on my radar. And I studied turbulent flow fields that are made to extrude polymers that make waterproofing materials that you see on the outsides of envelopes and diapers and waterproof clothing. And at the end of my PhD research, my conclusion, what I was researching the whole time was really, can you improve the equipment that's used to make that stuff to save energy and save material? And the answer was no. So I had just spent 6 years of my life doing research to find out basically what industry was doing was already the best option. And so that really made me think about, what do I want to do with my career? I wanted to do something impactful and that I felt like I was making a difference in the world. And so I decided, without any background or family history, that I wanted to work in energy because it's something that touches everything in our lives every day. And so I was pretty much a blank slate in the energy world, and so just started looking at different positions and found one in the Denver area with a startup company looking at carbon capture technologies. And being a chemical engineer, I thought that really fit my background. So I applied and got a job and helped a small company called ADA Environmental Solutions start their carbon capture program. And so I was there 6 years, and during the course of that time, I started to get more interested in the big picture, not just the technology, but I started to understand that if we don't explain this technology to people, it's not going to go anywhere. Like policymakers, the public, it was really not on the radar of anyone at that time. And so I started volunteering for different groups and participating in national level discussions, which led me to my next job, where I work for Shenhua Group, actually running an international journal focused on clean coal technologies and policies, which is very weird for an engineer to do. But it was a Chinese company, and China engineers can do anything, is what they believe. And so I did that for a few years. I worked for Tri-State Generation and Transmission, a rural electric co-op headquartered in Westminster. Then worked for Peabody, Vice President of Coal Generation Emissions Technologies before I came here. But really, in all of those jobs, there was some tie to Wyoming. And as I got further in my career, I had more and more interactions with the School of Energy Resources. So when the job opened up, I thought it was a bit of a leap of faith. Definitely hadn't ever considered academia, but I applied, and now here I am.
So I knew you while you were at Peabody, and so I have a kind of a backbench version of how that story went. But as you said, it kind of took a flyer to, it was a different type of job, it was in a different place. And at this point, you have a young family. Mm-hmm. And I know they played a pivotal role in your decision to come to Wyoming once you were offered the position. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it was with your family and moving to a new place?
Yeah, so we had been in St. Louis 3 years. And after living out west before that, and my husband's from New Mexico, we really wanted to get out west. But the kids were very young. The twins were 2 years old when I applied for this job, and my son was 8. And I actually had a choice. So I had an opportunity either to go to Houston or to come to Laramie. And really the deal breaker for me was being able to have the opportunity to raise my family in Wyoming. So it meant a lot. I think that they're having much more of a childhood closer to what I had, where they have a lot more freedom. They're spending a lot of time outside. It's actually better here. We do have mosquitoes, and they're very vicious for 1 month a year, but it's not like Oklahoma mosquitoes that are around for like 9 months of the year. But other than that, they're outside, they're thriving and learning to fish and doing all the things that come with being out west and in Wyoming. So that was really powerful and part of the reason we wanted to be out here. But my family was definitely a big part of the reason that we chose to come to Laramie over Houston. But also the School of Energy Resources, I had known about for a long time, and I think it was really attractive to me to be somewhere that has the kind of innovators that are here and can make a difference. In Houston, you're another cog in the wheel. That's not true here. You can really make a difference. Just one person can.
That's right. People in Wyoming often like to say that our state is a small town with really long streets. Now that you've been here for 4 years, have you found that to be true?
The streets are very long and often closed. I've heard that saying a lot. I have found it to be true. It's interesting because I started here right as COVID was really ramping up. So I was at the university 2 days before it closed to in-person classes and service, and everyone disappeared. So I was very delayed in getting to know people around the state, which was tough because it was hard to build trust like on Zoom. And so I feel like I'm a little bit delayed and even today, still getting out there and meeting everyone that's important to the energy sector. But I think the important thing that I've learned about Wyoming is that people really do care. They're passionate about their state, and everyone is connected to everyone, which I find really attractive. You're not going to be mean to people and disappear in a crowd here.
That's right.
So, which I like. You have to be on your game, and the only hard thing is if you just want to roll out of bed and go to the grocery store and no one to see you, probably is not going to happen. Yeah, that's the hard part. But
right.
Other than that,
you can guarantee it's going to happen.
It is going to happen. You're going to know someone at the grocery store.
Right. So I think you've hit on kind of the notion of maybe the other side of it being a small place and everyone's really interconnected. A lot of people, especially in the energy space, have had decade-long relationships with each other. And you said a little bit about it, but I'm really interested in your thoughts on how to navigate kind of the tight-knit nature of our state, especially in the energy space, because it gets even smaller. So have you had any sort of strategies or advice that you've taken to try to, because you've done an amazing job in being able to infiltrate all of those and form really solid relationships. I've seen it. I just think that would be helpful advice to people that are trying to sort of break into a new place or a new market.
That's a good question. I don't know if I had any kind of strategy. I think, first of all, having people like Scott Quillinan, Fred McLaughlin, that have that were at the state survey and actually having the state survey across the street, and then now having you part of our team, Kara, I'm surrounded by people who have great connections. And one thing I found, whether you're thinking about, industry or the Petroleum Association of Wyoming or the Wyoming Mining Association, everyone has the energy sector's best interest at heart. The Minerals Committee, they're all working together. They don't always have on a specific topic the same goal, but I think one of the things that I found really attractive is that if you have really thought through an issue, people are going to listen to your thought. And so I think the best thing you can do in Wyoming is come prepared and listen to what other people have to say and try to reach a common goal that's in the best interest of the state. And you're going to find a lot of success here. I don't think this is not the place for talking heads, right? You really have to have some substance. So
yeah, that's good to hear. Maybe switching gears just a little bit to your management at School of Energy Resources and some of the changes that you've made. I've been fortunate to be here for about a year now, and I like to observe people a lot, and so I've been able to observe your leadership style. I want to explore a few things about that. And I'm really interested in this because I consider you a young leader, and I get to say that because I'm older than you. But in my mind, you just have a really deliberate leadership style that exhibits itself in several ways that we can talk about. But I'm really interested in how you developed that leadership style. Again, were you intentional about specific authors or different principles that you've taken, or a mentor? How at your young age have you been able to lead the ship here through some things that we'll talk about more in such a deliberate way?
Okay, well, I'm not that young, but I love that line of questioning, so we'll just stay with that. So I don't think I'm particularly deliberate. I will say I was very fortunate to have I've had great mentors throughout my career who probably gave me more respect and attention than I deserved at a young age. I was definitely one of those young career professionals that thought I knew everything and kind of slowly figured out that I didn't. So I've had incredible mentors throughout my career. I also at Peabody, I was in their corporate kind of leadership development program. And one thing that really hit me, because generally when you think about leadership, you'll see, I think, especially in corporate, people can be very polished. And that is not me, But we had a couple leaders that I would go to, for example, our chief information officer, who was she was very happy and bubbly and open. And one day I asked her about it, and I was like, you're not like the polished corporate executive look. And she said, oh, Holly, I could never be that. That's not me. And then the other example is the chair of Peabody's board, Bob Malone, came and talked to that group that was going through leadership training, and he said something that I always remembered. He said, you really have to lead from your heart. And it's hard because then you're putting yourself out there. And so that's something that I've always tried to do. And honestly, I don't have a choice. That's just who I am. So and then another impactful, and even probably the most impactful opportunity I had, was to be part of Leadership Wyoming and the class of 2022, which they have this like gang symbol thing. But it was an incredible experience, and it surprised me because I had gone through corporate leadership training before, and this was very different. This wasn't corporate grooming for executive positions. This was, all of you 360 degrees developing leadership and understanding who you are and how to be a leader, and also how to lead people who are very different from you. And then learning about Wyoming and the value and how to know enough about Wyoming to lead the state or take some sort of leadership role in the state. And so that was incredibly valuable. But I think leadership actually isn't that hard. It's just a matter of getting your own ego out of the way and hiring incredible people and then supporting them. And I didn't even have to hire that many. I mean, I hired you, which was amazing. Took a long time. You're a hard sell. But, there was some really incredible people already here at SER, and that's part of the reason I wanted to come here. So just trying to even further empower them to do what they thought was best for Wyoming and for SER, and it's so far turned out really well.
I would agree with that. You talk about culture a lot in our internal meetings, and I think even externally. And again, I observe here different aspects of culture. I've been in a few organizations at this point in my career. And one of the rules that you have, which I found sort of astonishing, was you don't deliver emails after 5 o'clock or outside of regular business hours, not after 5 o'clock and not on the weekend. Every organization I've ever been in rewards extra effort. And so from a young age, I've learned, I want to be the one emailing after 5. I'm certainly emailing on the weekend because I was working, but it demonstrated everyone that I was working. And so I had a hard time with that rule at first. I didn't really understand it. But as I've been here, and the way that you explained it to me was really interesting, and I tell a lot of people about this because I think it's important. And you said to me, I don't care if you're working, but I don't want whoever receives that to think that they should be working. And so I think it would be helpful if you talked a little bit about culture. That, to me, seems to be like the brightest line rule that you've put out there, but maybe there are others I don't know yet, or I'm just observing sort of, because they're just there. But how did you come to that? Why do you think it's important? And are there other really strong things that you have about culture?
So one of my focuses for culture is not to have a lot of rules. But maybe
that's why I don't know the others.
Yeah, no, because there's not. And of course UW has its policies and procedures, which we of course
follow those.
But for SCR, one thing I developed, this was partly during COVID, it's called the Humane Meeting Policy, where we try to end meetings with enough time for people to get to their next meeting or go get a drink of water, take care of their biological functions. So that's one. And that got really brutal during COVID, like back-to-back meetings are each an hour and people thought they had to fill the time. And I do try to keep meetings on time to respect people's time. And the other is the one you mentioned where people are adults that work here. They're very passionate about their work. If you want to work all the time, that is totally up to you. But that can cascade downhill to someone. And so it's not that I never send anything on the nights and weekends, but you have to think about what actually needs to happen in a night and weekend. And so if there's something that really is urgent, go for it. But we also need to respect each other's time. And I think one of the tough things about being in research and development and some of this novel policy work is you have to be really creative. And you can't be creative when you're stressed out. And so I think I see people work so hard while they're here that I really want to give them that opportunity to disconnect and hopefully relax so that when they come back, they can be creative. We're focused on promoting energy-driven economic development for Wyoming. We want to come up with new sources of revenue. We want to support the energy sector. And those can be very heavy tasks. When you look at revenue for the state, it has been declining. When you drive by a school in Wyoming, it was built with money from coal that is no longer coming in from those lease payments. So we have to find solutions for that, and I think we feel like that's part of our job. Well, that's a heavy burden to have on your shoulders, and you're trying to innovate. And the other thing about research is that it fails. It's going to fail. Things we do will fail. You will spend years of your life on something that will not move forward in certain scenarios. So when you think about all that, I guess that's where kind of trying to keep a positive culture and understanding we're all humans too, by the way. We can snipe at each other. It just stuff happens, and understanding that we're people, and we're doing our best, and we just support each other, and we protect each other's ability to recharge so that we can take on those big topics.
One of the other things I've observed in this last year being here is the extensive efforts you go to recruit and retain Wyoming talent.
Oh, yeah.
Which, as a native and in Wyoming educated...
Are you talking about you?
I'm not talking about me. I see it all around me. But why do you think that's important? And how do you go about it? We hear a lot in Wyoming about how our talent leaves the state and doesn't want to be here. You seem to be able to have tapped into a pool of a lot of Wyoming natives and or educated professionals that want to be here, really engaged, especially in the energy space. So why is it important, and how do you get them?
Well, that's a great question. So one of the ways we get folks to work at the School of Energy Resources that are either UW grads or Wyoming natives or both is, especially for the UW grad side, we work with them while they get their graduate studies. So we might support a PhD thesis or work with them if they're in law school on a research project. So we know them. We have a multi-year interview, which is great. And they know what we're doing, and we've identified areas of interest. And so often we'll hire students upon graduation, so hire graduates to come work with us, but we've been working with them for years. And then I think the other thing is that we have these high-tech jobs and they're helping the state. So I think our mission, being focused on helping Wyoming, is very attractive to native Wyomingites. And so it's not that hard to recruit them. We do have to sometimes reach out for some positions and really share them widely, but once people know about an opportunity in the energy sector in Wyoming where you can have a 4-year degree or an advanced degree, and you can really contribute and give back to the state. That just seems like that's very attractive, and we're able to kind of leverage that talent. I think people believe in what we're doing here.
I would agree with that.
Why did you want to work here? After I recruited you for a long time.
Well, obviously you were a great pull. I've known you for a long time, and I actually was, as I said, on the sidelines as you were getting recruited here, and I was just so excited when you took the position, and we obviously kept in touch and we're talking about the exciting things going on here. And I was in a position when you started talking to me that was West focused but not specifically Wyoming focused, and I think I realized how much I missed being able to advocate for my state. And so very much of what you're talking about, it was an opportunity for me to be involved in the issues that I think are the most challenging for our state, and instead of worrying about them and all of those things, it gave me an opportunity to get in and actually contribute and do the thing that I love. So it was really impossible to say no, and you were pretty persistent. So
I can be that.
That's how I ended up here. So it appears to me that you have one of the most demanding jobs in Wyoming, considering your travel schedule, the boards that you sit on, the big initiatives that are on your plate, and yet you remain one of the most pleasant people around. Your energy level is skyrocket every day, all day, and personally I just find it really remarkable. And I think our listeners would benefit from maybe some personal advice on that. You mentioned recharging and the need to do that. How do you do that? How do you do it all?
I don't know if I do it all. I appreciate the question. There's definitely days when I don't feel like I get it all done. Yeah, but thank you for that. We should do more of these.
I'm not trying to get brownie points, but
no,
this is a real question.
Yeah, first of all, I think I just am by my nature a positive person, but I also feel like I'm not wasting my time, so I feel like I'm making a difference. I think that's the easiest way to get disillusioned and kind of lose your edge and lose your energy, is to feel like you're going to work every day and it doesn't matter, and that you're working towards something that won't make an impact, at least for me. And I don't feel that way, so it does keep me energized. I think I get to work with awesome people here at SER. A lot of the deans here at UW are really supportive, holding each other up. So that's been great, especially as I transitioned into academia, which is very different than anywhere I've worked before. So I don't know. I actually think most of it, though, is just the people that work here just keep me going. And that's a great question. I don't know. I just think that's the way I am.
I think that was a pretty good answer.
Okay.
We'll switch gears again a little bit and talk more specifically about SER and the funding model here, which has evolved pretty significantly during your tenure. Did you have a specific goal in that regard when you came here, or has it evolved more organically?
No, I definitely didn't have any goals like that. I mean, don't forget, I showed up 2 days later, everyone's gone. We have a 10% budget cut like 3 months after that. So it was a bit of reeling at that time. And so, our goal is to generate new revenue sources based on Wyoming's energy and mineral wealth. That's our goal. So whatever it takes to get to that is what we're doing. I think one of the things you're seeing, there's a couple things. I mean, we definitely have grown as a team. That's happened partly just because we reorganized in a way I think that might have empowered some of the folks that were here. There's also been a lot of one-time unique funding that we've been able to go after and bring to Wyoming. And the other thing that's happening is some of the technologies that SER started on years ago, like carbon capture, use, and storage, and our carbon engineering program, which is focused on uses for coal, those have moved out of the lab and to larger and larger scales over the years to now where we're working on these big commercial projects. So by its very nature, we're having this large influx of funding, and it could go down again without really having to change our personnel, because right now we're out in the field, we're building multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment to demonstrate technologies. We're having, wells drilled that are designed to store CO2. So those are really big dollar items. So I definitely don't have a goal in terms of funding. It's what does it take to get to where we're supposed to be and delivering on SCR's mission. And so we definitely keep an eye on how much we have and make sure it's enough to do the work we promised we're going to do. But no, I think the most important thing is you have to keep your eye on what your ultimate goal is and not get distracted by, it could be, you could say, well, I want to grow SCR's budget to $40 million a year, which we could totally do. But is that what we're supposed to be doing? Or are we supposed to be delivering technologies that are important for Wyoming? So let's say we demonstrate our carbon engineering work and it's out in the world getting licensed. Well, the next thing we work on might start in the lab again, and we're going to look a lot smaller. But as long as we're keeping that pipeline full of innovation and providing academic experiences for students here at UW, then we're doing what we're supposed to do. So,
And the School of Energy Resources has received really steady and strong support from Wyoming governors, from the legislature over the years. And I think we refer to that as kind of hard money funding.
Right.
And what we're talking about now with a lot of the new funds that are coming in are sort of soft money. Can you tell us kind of how that ratio has changed since you got here? And is there a perfect ratio, or is it more what you just talked about? It is what it is. But I noticed that you try to demonstrate to policymakers that we're not coming to them for any more than we absolutely need. Mm-hmm. And I think they do appreciate these efforts to bring in the soft dollars.
Right.
So how has that evolved over your tenure?
So it's definitely grown. So we have basically what we call our standard budget. That's what you would maybe call our hard funding or our hard money. And that allows us to deliver our academic program, to have our administration, and to undertake research that is earlier stage, fund our centers of excellence, fund CERPA, Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis. And right now, that's about $9 million a year.
But that stayed pretty constant since you got here.
Well, it did decrease by 10% the first 3 months I was here because we had those budget cuts associated with COVID. But then that has not changed since then. So it was about 10 million a year when I first got here, and now it's 9. So that was the bulk of SCR's funding for a long time. And then before I got here, the legislature had supported some one-time funding in our carbon engineering, that's the coal to novel products program, at a larger scale than they had historically. But then, and we had federal funds, so we had the Wyoming Carbon Safe Project. That was a big part of our soft funding portfolio. Well, now we have 4 carbon safe projects that we're either working on or negotiating with the Department of Energy, and lots of other topics. So we've really expanded the breadth of what we're working on and been able to bring in funding around those. Everything from hydrogen and produced water to nuclear to carbon storage, just all kinds of different things. We do go to the state last for our funding. So if there's something that we think we need to do and we can't get funding anywhere else to do it, but we think it'll help Wyoming, that's when we go to the state for any new one-time funding. So again, I don't necessarily think there's a right number, but I do think it's helpful to diversify so that if one area just experiences a drop, that another area might be able to pick up some of that slack. And one of the things that I haven't talked about is we're also increasing our philanthropic fundraising. SCR did that extensively when it was first getting stood up, and Mark Northam, who is my predecessor in this role, he did a great job raising funds. You can see incredible names of private supporters all over this building, Energy Innovation Center. And but that had not really been very active for a number of years, so we're ramping that back up as well. And one of the cool things about that funding is it can help sustain us for the long term. And getting some of these endowments in place, it helps us prepare for a time when there's an economic downturn. There's not as much federal funding, there's not as much state funding available, but Wyoming still has needs. And so we're really ramping that up. So I think maybe I don't have a specific ratio. It depends what we're working on. There's a lot of money for carbon storage right now, so we're able to harvest that. If we're working on something else, then we might go to a different source. But I do think that having that diversity is really important.
With these new funding sources comes the need for new people, growing the team, which you've done significantly over the last year. Maybe just talk about those numbers in terms of growth, and then tying it back to what we've talked about earlier. How are you managing it as the leader and maintaining the culture and making those hires and growing the team at the rate that is pretty astonishing?
So again, it's actually not me, right? It's who have I hired? Not very many people, but the people that work for me and the people that work for them have hired a lot of people. So I am lost count. We've certainly more than doubled in size in terms of our internal staff.
In what period of time?
I've been here about 3.5 years, but we didn't grow a lot for that first year. So it's really been over the last 2 years. We've more than doubled in our internal research function, and also our financial team, of course, has to grow at the same time to make sure that we're providing good oversight of all our funds and providing the transparency required. And as far as culture, I think everyone's on board with, at first I wanted to meet every single person that we were interviewing or that was seriously being considered for a job, and that just got out of hand to where I couldn't do it anymore, especially when we had a number of hires. So I don't even know the number, but we had a lot in 1 month, and I gave up. And so really it's just, I think the team is bought in to making sure they're hiring people that they want to work with, and that maybe have all different backgrounds, but the thing they have in common is that they're going to contribute to a workplace where we support each other and try to respect each other and contribute to a culture that's just what you need for innovation.
Another area that has grown pretty significantly at SER is the sort of outreach effort.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I consider SER having a pretty significant ground game when it comes to outreach and communication with stakeholders. So tell us a little bit about what those efforts are, how they've grown over the years, and then finally how you think this podcast can contribute to expanding those efforts.
Great question. So I am super excited about our outreach program. It is a small but mighty team. So it really all changed when we hired Christine Reed as our director. Before that, actually that position had been open for a number of years. And for example, like our LinkedIn profile for the School of Energy Resources had about 200 followers. And completely organically, since Christine's been here, I think we're getting close to about 3,000 now. We have now newsletters, but this is more than just telling people what we're doing. I mean, we have a lot of public funds, and to me, it's really about transparency, making sure folks know what we're working on and how we're using, this is Wyoming's tax dollars in a lot of cases that they're investing here at the School of Energy Resources. So we want to make sure people know what we're doing, and really, we've been launching those efforts. I think it's so important to do, and I love the idea of a podcast because we're always trying to figure out, how do we reach people that we're not reaching? That's the thing we struggle with. Like the energy nerds in Wyoming, they're following us. They're already getting our newsletter. Is there a new way to tap into other folks? And back to your question about long roads, I mean, podcasts are a great thing to do as you drive around the state and beyond. And I think also podcasts can reach people outside the state. This is one thing that I've struggled, I haven't always appreciated. Our role is focused on Wyoming. But I sometimes forget how important it is for people outside the state to understand what we're doing too. And the fact that we export the vast majority of the energy we produce means we have to start leaving our state's borders more in terms of our outreach program. And we are trying to do that, but a podcast is a really great way of doing that. So I'm hoping that this will reach other groups as well. Anyone interested in innovation and like, hey, what is going on up there in Wyoming? Like, what's going on in that state? And maybe we'll turn on this podcast. So there's a lot of different ways I'm hoping it will help. But I'm curious about you because like this was your idea. So what do you think? Like, why did you think that this is something we should do?
Well, I think it's a lot of what you said. I think it's a medium that people are really turning to as a source of information and can support all different kinds of interests. I've pretty much given up on TV at this point. I don't really like even listening to the radio in terms of even Sirius or some station. It gives me an opportunity to pursue a lot of my different interests 20 or 30 minutes at a time. I can listen to it while I'm driving, which I do a lot of. I can do it when I'm walking. I do it when I'm listening, when I'm doing laundry, when I'm ironing. Like, it's just so convenient for me. And I like that you can take it and leave it. You can start a show and come back when you have some more time. And I think it does have the opportunity just to reach wider. We've done a lot of kind of webinar series over the years. That was kind of the medium for a long time. And that's really schedule specific.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're available. But if you're not, and people always say, well, they're recorded, you can go back. I just don't think that gets a very high take rate. And I think podcasts are a little bit different in that regard. It's just in your menu. You can go access it whenever you have the time to do it. So I just think it's a medium that offers so many opportunities that you talked about. And I'm a little biased here, but it's become my favorite medium.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was important for us to integrate it into our already very strong outreach program.
I agree. We do get some people who come back and watch our webinars, but when you think about how easy it is versus a podcast, like hopefully you're not watching a webinar while you're driving.
Right.
So, like, please don't do that. So, but a podcast we can do. Right. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see how it goes. Okay.
Well, Holly, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for making yourself available for so long for this conversation. Final question is the one that I'm sure you've expected and everyone probably expects, but I think it's good for you to articulate it. What's your vision for SER? Where do you see us in 5 years? I think there's so much uncertainty about the future of the energy in our state, given some of the national policies and things that we're seeing going on. So really interested in your perspective. Where are we in 5 years? What big accomplishments has SER lynched at that point? What do you see?
That's a great question. And I always struggle with accomplishments because they happen over time, right? They don't happen all at once. And so when you look back, you're like, wow, we've totally done a lot of really incredible things. But looking forward, I think our goal in 5 years, we want to have CO2 being injected in Wyoming. That is something that SER and our collaborators have been working on for a long time. We are so close to commercialization. The state is about to issue its first 3 Class 6 permits with Frontier Carbon Solutions, which is our partner in the Sweetwater Carbon Storage Hub. So that's one thing, is we want to be injecting CO2, we want to be collecting data, and we want to be bringing people from outside Wyoming here to look at that project to show that this works. And hopefully we're beyond that, and we're starting to work with other actually, even today, we're starting to work with coal-fired power plants and gas plants outside the state that use Wyoming fuel and try to help them develop a CO2 storage approach. So hopefully that would be one goal. In 5 years, we should have one, and a second goal would be to fully license, have demonstrated, license, and have commercialized, like maybe under construction, our carbon engineering processes that use Wyoming coal to make things like bricks and other construction materials and soil amendments and coal-derived asphalt from a solvent extract. I mean, we are building the demonstration of the pyrolysis unit now. So that in 5 years should be commercial. And then we're working on things like rare earths and critical minerals. We're trying to grow that team and working on new things like building a system or inventing a system kind of to extract rare earths and critical minerals from Wyoming resources, including coal seams. So the whole pipeline of innovation, we're trying to get CO2 storage out into the commercial sector, get carbon engineering out into the commercial sector, and then start refilling the pipeline. And so what is at the front of the pipeline, I don't even know, because we haven't started working on it yet. But always continuing that innovation and adding new things that are going to benefit the state over the long term. So hopefully in 5 years, we've commercialized some stuff and working on things that I don't even know about yet.
Where would you put hydrogen in the pipeline, the current pipeline?
Hydrogen, so that's really interesting. Hydrogen is both early stage and close to commercialization, just depending on what you're doing. So we have a new exciting project that is with Los Alamos National Lab, and it's led by our Hydrogen Energy Research Center. And it's focused on a huge challenge for the Wyoming energy sector, which is produced water. It's a huge cost dealing with the water that's produced with oil and gas. And so there's a project now to look at using that produced water in a really efficient way to create hydrogen. Well, that is not that early stage. Like, it's something we could actually implement again in 5 years. If we're successful with this project, we could be moving toward commercialization of this in 5 years. So from that perspective, it could be close to commercialization, especially if you could co-locate with our refinery and help them have a new source of hydrogen. So there's all kinds of options, but then at the same time, hydrogen's really challenging because the demand side isn't there yet, and that can take a long time to build up. So production of hydrogen is possible today. Use, it's going to take some work, but it's interesting when we can find these synergies for different technologies and create a new product like hydrogen from Wyoming natural gas, but also deal with produced water. So we're excited about those kind of intersections and the project that we're just launching now.
I keep saying it's my last question.
I know.
Maybe just one more, because you and I could go on for hours.
Oh, yeah.
Just to kind of complete that circle, the nuclear industry.
Yep.
Obviously, we've been a miner of uranium for a long time, but this electricity piece has really, in my view, excited everyone around the state and be thinking about different opportunities. Where do you think we're going with nuclear in the next 5-10 years?
And by we, now you're talking about Wyoming.
I'm talking about Wyoming.
Okay. So where are we in 5 years with nuclear? Nuclear doesn't move fast, as a lot of big technologies don't, but they're so impactful. Carbon capture and storage and nuclear are so impactful, even though it can take a long time to get the first ones to fruition, the first of a kind. So in 5 years, I hope to see Wyoming mining uranium, either enriching it or probably more likely sending it to another domestic U.S. facility to enrich it. Has a power plant about to come online, not quite online yet, in the Natrium facility for being built by TerraPower. And we found some manufacturing around nuclear that the state can bring into its sector. So there's all different areas. And then I think we also, I don't know if this will happen, but we need to look around the state for opportunities to use the heat associated with nuclear and maybe electricity and see if there's any chances that could advantage Wyoming. So if micro reactors can get there, power costs are high at really rural locations where oil and gas might be produced. So that would be another option. So I think we have an incredible opportunity with nuclear here, and I'm very hopeful that Wyoming's going to leverage it.
Well, great. Thanks again for the conversation. Sounds like there are just so many exciting things going on in Wyoming, and I, for one, am just thrilled to be here to help work on them. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.